Imagine a small, peaceful town surrounded by mountains where everyone knows each other. One night, a mother of 3 goes out and never comes home again. A few days later, her car is found abandoned and burned. The family has no doubt that something terrible has happened, but as the investigation begins, secrets come to light that no one suspected. The woman everyone knew as a loving mother and devoted daughter turns out to have been leading a second, completely unknown life. Who was actually Paige Bergfeld? What happened the night she disappeared? And did the secret she kept put her on a path to danger? This is the story of a disappearance that has puzzled investigators for years and changed the lives of a family forever. Paige Bergfeld is a 34-year-old mother of 3 who lives in Grand Junction, Colorado. Her family and friends describe her as a dedicated mother who puts her children above all else. One night, Paige disappears without a trace just a few miles from her home. A few days later, her car is found abandoned and set on fire in a parking lot. From the very beginning, investigators have been convinced that she did not disappear voluntarily. The family categorically refuses to believe that Paige would abandon her 3 children. According to her relatives, she would do anything to be with them. As they begin their search, investigators stumble upon information that changes the course of the case. It turns out that Paige has been hiding parts of her life, even from those closest to her. Police are starting to check on those closest to her. Among the first to be investigated is her first husband, Ron Beegler. The two had recently rekindled their old relationship and started seeing each other again. On the day of the disappearance, Paige and Ron met and spent part of the afternoon together. Later that evening, Paige called him on her cell phone. The conversation was brief, and she promised to get back to him. However, this was one of the last known calls from Paige Bergfeld. The next day, Ron tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. 2 days later, he called her home and learned that she had not returned home since that evening. He immediately notified authorities and thus began the investigation into one of Colorado's most mysterious disappearances. Paige's friends are focusing on her second ex-husband, Rob Dixon, the father of her 3 children. The reason is their difficult history together. Paige and Rob met in 1997. In 2004, she called 911 after a serious domestic dispute. A year later, the police were called again after Paige reported physical aggression from Rob. He was arrested, but the case was later dropped after an anger management course. When the couple divorced in 2006, Rob had already declared bankruptcy and was living in Philadelphia. After Paige's disappearance, he naturally becomes one of the people investigators are looking into. The reason is not only their shared past, but also disturbing posts that Paige herself has left online. In them, she says her children are afraid of what might happen to her. However, investigators determine that Rob has an alibi. By this time, he was a long way from Colorado and was gradually being removed from the list of prime suspects. So, both of Paige's ex-husbands appeared to have confirmed alibis. But if it wasn't Ron or Rob, the question becomes even more difficult. Who had a reason to harm Paige Bergfeld? As investigators search for answers, the family and volunteers continue to scour the vast and difficult terrains surrounding Mesa County. The area is filled with desert expanses, canyons, and remote locations, where a person could search for days, weeks, even years without finding anything. The family doesn't give up. Her loved ones organize volunteers and continue the search, despite the heat, exhaustion, and the fear that they may never get an answer. But as the search continues outside, the investigation begins to turn inward, to Paige's computer. And it's there that investigators discover traces of a life her family knew almost nothing about. As the family continues their search, Paige's family finds her computer and immediately realizes it may contain important clues. They call the police, convinced that it contains information that could explain why Paige disappeared. Soon after, investigators found Paige's personal belongings scattered along Highway 50, about 15 miles from where her burned-out car was found. Among them were a checkbook and membership cards. These clues don't provide answers, but they do indicate that someone wanted to scatter evidence and divert the investigation. At the same time, the computer reveals a secret that her family never suspected. Paige didn't just work as a mother, dance teacher, and kitchen supplies saleswoman. She also had a secret side business. On the internet, she used a different name and offered paid encounters as an escort. It's a shock to the family, but her relatives don't judge her. They believe that Paige made this choice for the sake of her children and the difficult financial situation she was in. After the divorce, she remains the primary caregiver for her 3 children. Her ex-husband pays limited child support, and the mortgage on her home is huge. Paige is deeply in debt and struggles to maintain stability for her family. The new information, however, completely changes the investigation. Now investigators must check not only her relatives and ex-husbands, but also the people with whom Paige communicated in her secret life. The police did not find a diary with names, but her mobile phone turned out to be key. Through it, investigators began to track her contacts from the last days and hours. Among those being investigated is George Coraluso, a man who called Paige repeatedly the day she disappeared and left town 2 days later. But another man is of even greater interest, Lester Ralph Jones. According to the investigation, Jones was a client of Paige's and had met with her more than once. Authorities searched his home, but for a long time did not publicly reveal exactly what they found. However, there are several disturbing connections. Paige's burned-out car was found near where Jones works as a mechanic. Sniffer dogs led investigators from the parking lot to a camper shop connected to his workplace. Additionally, one of Paige's last phone calls was to someone using a prepaid phone. A camera from a local store shows a man believed to be Jones purchasing one. Jones denies having anything to do with Paige's disappearance, but his past has made investigators even more cautious. He has a criminal record that includes serious charges of domestic violence against a former partner. For Paige's family, it's a terrifying thought. If she had been in a relationship with such a person on the night of her disappearance, the danger may have been much greater than anyone had imagined. More than 3 months after Paige Bergfeld's disappearance, authorities have officially ruled out her 2 ex-husbands as prime suspects. The investigation is now focused on one man, Lester Ralph Jones. According to prosecutors, Jones was the prime suspect almost from the beginning. He knew Paige through her secret business, had a criminal past, and several important leads linked him to her final hours. But there was one huge problem. Paige's body had not been found. Without it, the prosecution didn't think they could prove their case in court, so her family continued to search. Her father, Frank Bergfeld, persevered for years despite the vast and difficult terrain around Grand Junction. 5 years after the disappearance, a breakthrough occurred. A hiker finds human remains in a ravine in an area that volunteers have already searched many times. The remains are identified through dental records. This is Paige. Investigators are unable to determine the exact cause of death, but the findings indicate that her final moments were likely violent. Traces have also been found that suggest she may have been restrained and taken away against her will. The location where she was found also helps investigators understand the significance of personal items found earlier along the highway. Checks, documents, and cards were scattered several kilometers before the area where her remains were later found. Prosecutors believe Paige may have been throwing away her belongings to leave a trail and help someone find her. For the family, this discovery is both an answer and a new pain. They already know that Paige won't be back, but the investigation can finally move forward. After the discovery of the remains, the prosecution believes they have enough evidence against Lester Ralph Jones. George Coraluso, the other man being investigated, has an alibi. He was in New Jersey the night Paige's car was set on fire. However, several important circumstances remain against Jones. Paige's car was found in a parking lot across from where he worked. The seat in the car had been pushed back as if it had been driven by someone considerably taller than Paige. There is also a prepaid phone that was used for only a few calls, all related to Paige. The last call was to her phone. Investigators say they have video footage and documents that show Jones purchased the phone. Then comes a strange conversation between Jones and a sheriff's officer. The conversation is about cars that have been seized and searched. During the conversation, Jones surprisingly mentions where a body might be buried. For Paige's father, this sounds like another worrying sign. In November 2014, more than 7 years after Paige's disappearance, Lester Ralph Jones was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder. His bail is set at $2 million. But even after his arrest, the case is not easy. The evidence is mostly circumstantial and must be proven before a jury. In July 2016, 9 years after Paige's disappearance, Jones' trial began. The prosecution presented the connections between him, the phone, the car, the locations, and Paige's last contacts. The defense attacked the investigation and pointed to other possible suspects, arguing that authorities focused too early on Jones. After 6 weeks of trial, the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict. The case ends without a verdict. It is a heavy blow to the family, but there is a second trial. At the end of 2016, a new jury finds Lester Ralph Jones guilty of kidnapping and murdering Paige Bergfeld. He is sentenced to life in prison without parole. After almost a decade, the family gets a judicial answer. But for Paige's father, this is not a victory. Nothing can bring his daughter back. For those close to her, Paige remains not the secret life, not the headlines, not the details of the investigation. She remains a mother, daughter, sister, and woman with a smile that, according to her family, lit up everything around her. Thank you for sticking with me until the end of this story. If the story touched you, support the video with a like and share it so it can reach more people. Subscribe to the channel and press the bell so you don't miss the next true crime cases and documentary investigations. What do you think? Was the evidence against Lester Ralph Jones enough? Or does this case leave questions unanswered? Write your opinion in the comments.